radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show. On this Thursday, August 14th. It's late here. I have a feeling in this office that I have, I think they turn off the air conditioning after a certain hour. I'm the only one here, it's 9 p.m. And I think the air conditioning is off because it is hot in here. I don't know what it's like outside. It was 90 all day, but anyway, it's hot. I'm complaining. On the other hand, in Michigan, the sun actually came out today. The sun came out. It is, after all, August. And the Michiganians on my chat are celebrating because they finally, it's a beautiful day in Michigan. And you got to celebrate a beautiful day in Michigan. Once in a while, it actually happens. I am in Lisbon, Portugal. It was 90 degrees today, but I have to say, the weather here is very California-like, which is nice, which is pretty much perfect. It's not super hot, but not super hot. It's relatively dry, certainly compared to Puerto Rico. It's dry, and it never rains. It just never rains in the summer. It doesn't rain, just like California. Last rain is sometime in I don't know, in June, and then it rains again in September, but in between it doesn't rain. Just like Israel, just like California. This is the weather I like. No rain, no snow, and just nice weather. Anyway, Puerto Rico's difficult. It never gets too hot, which is good. It never gets below 70, so it never gets even mildly cold. But it rains a lot, and it rains in unpredictable times, and it just rains. You never know. It could be blue skies everywhere, and within 15 minutes it's raining. That is not true in Portugal. You just get blue skies and no rain, and it's gorgeous. All right, enough about the weather. You're not here to hear about the weather. My monitor here is, it's not quite right. All right, let's talk about the news. All right, so tomorrow, Putin and Trump will be meeting in Anchorage, Alaska, for the big summit on Ukraine. I will be commenting on it tomorrow, although by the time I do the show, I don't know how much we'll know. Anchorage, Alaska is like on that other time zone, somewhere close to Hawaii. So I'm not sure when they're meeting and whether we'll have any information by the time we do the show. I hope we have. I hope I have something interesting to say about it. As you know, I'm worried about this meeting. I'm worried because I think Putin's better at this than Trump is. I think Trump is very weak, particularly in dealing with Putin. There's already all kinds of, Trump is trying to dangle economic stuff in front of Putin in exchange for peace or a ceasefire or something. I don't know, rare earth materials from Alaska, which we don't even get. Minerals in Alaska, getting rid of all the sanctions and all of that. So Trump is definitely going after Putin on the economics of it, and that's good because Russia is really struggling. It's suffering, and it's being hit hard economically. On the other hand, Putin basically wants Donbass. He wants to be able to get around the fortifications that the Ukrainians have built that have basically prevented his army from moving forward for the last almost 3 years. 2.5 years, and they're just stuck at this border, at this line of fortifications in Donbass. And he would love to see Ukraine retreat from those fortifications in exchange for a ceasefire, which he will then violate at some point, 6 months from now, a year from now, whenever he has replenished troops. And now he doesn't face those fortifications in front of him. So we know what Putin wants. Putin wants a ceasefire, a pause. He wants all the economic goodies, but what he wants is a pause. He wants to get around the fortifications. He's willing to give up some territory in the south in order to get, better established in the east. He wants to continue this war. He doesn't want peace. He wants a ceasefire. And I think he'll come at it from a perspective of, no, I'm a peacemaker. I want the fighting to stop. I want everything to go away. So anyway, we'll see. We'll see if the people surrounding Trump are smart enough or good enough to be able to prep him for what he's going to face. Maybe Marco Rubio, who is relatively speaking a Russia hawk. I don't know who else. Witkoff strikes me as pretty dumb, but not very savvy, not very strategic. Hegseth, it's just ignorant. So I'm not sure who is there in his team, foreign policy team, that can really prep and coach Trump for his meeting with Putin. So I'm worried. The Europeans are worried. Zelensky's worried. They should be worried. We're worried. We'll see what happens tomorrow. We'll see what happens tomorrow. And of course, a lot of it depends on just the rapport he has with Putin, whether Putin sucks up to him and says nice things about him. And I think Putin is smart enough, savvy enough, that he knows how to play Trump. I think he knows that, not like Zelensky, who didn't know how to play Trump. I think Putin knows how to play Trump, and I think he'll play him. All right, so put that aside. We'll talk more about it for certain tomorrow, whether we have info or don't have info. We'll talk about it in anticipation of, or if there's already a press conference, post-press conference. Let's talk about this PPI number that came out. PPI is the Producer Price Index. It is an index of the prices producers pay. Like everything else, it's like an amalgamated number. It's kind of tricky how they calculate it. It's not exactly a measure of prices consumers face. It's much more about producers, and it includes services, and it's tricky how they calculate these things. So it's a noisy number. It is a number, people talk about it as an indicator of inflation, because if producers are paying higher prices, ultimately they will pass those prices on to consumers, and consumer prices will go up. So there is a correlation between PPI and CPI, Consumer Price Index, down the road. And again, this is price inflation. I know there are other definitions of inflation. We're just using inflation here in the conventional sense. And even there, it has to be really tricky, because is the price level really rising, or is just a particular basket of goods rising? And that's always tricky to identify. Importantly, PPI does not include tariffs. It does not include the impact of tariffs. So this is the price that the producer is paying, excluding import taxes, excluding customs, excluding tariffs. Right? Now, the number that came in today was a big surprise. It came in significantly higher than expected. The estimate for the month, for the 1 month, was 0.2%. That's what people were expecting. It came in at 0.9%. Now, 0.9% is very high. That suggests a PPI annualized, if you go project forward, and if it stays at 0.9%, unlikely, but if it stayed, it would be between 7 and 8%. That's a very high increase in prices. Producer prices, but still prices. On a year-over-year basis, that is, if we look backwards to 12 months ago, over the last 12 months, the increase has been 3.3%. Estimate was 2.5. So we're moving away from like the 2 to 3 range and moving into the plus 3%, which is, I think, worrisome to a lot of people. And this is going to put Jerome Powell in a real bind. I mean, Powell believes that the way to fight price inflation, the way to fight consumer inflation, is to raise interest rates. And interest rates and inflation had stabilized around 2.7%. That's CPI inflation, right? CPI stabilized at around 2.7%. And the hope was it was going to come down from that, and the Fed, of course, has a 2% goal. But PPI now suggests maybe CPI, when it's ultimately reported, will start heading up above 2.7%, above 3%, way away from the Fed's goal of 2%, which means the Fed might need to reverse any interest rate cut that they might have planned and might ultimately be increasing interest rates. Now, again, this is all kind of the thinking of how all this plays out. Right? Now, there is another measure of inflation, the PCE, personal consumption expenditure, which is, again, another measure of consumer prices. Consumer prices. It is expected out, I think, next week. And given the PPI number, now it's expected to be up quite a bit. Again, putting pressure on Powell not to lower interest rates. On the other hand, if the employment numbers are to be believed, then this economy is slowing, hiring is slowing, and since the Fed has a mandate for full employment, it should be lowering interest rates to increase employment. So Powell and the Fed are in a quandary. Do they increase interest rates to fight inflation, or what they perceive as inflation? Or do they lower interest rates to fight a slowing economy? And of course, this is the central planner dilemma. There's no right answer. You divorced yourself from market signals. You've divorced yourself from market prices. There is no right amount of interest rate. Interest rate should be determined in the marketplace. And of course, there's no right amount of money. The quantity of money should be based on supply and demand, not based on the decisions of 12 individuals around a table. But you can see Trump, of course, putting huge amount of pressure on the Fed to lower interest rates. And Powell not knowing what to do. He's stuck. He's in trouble. He probably cannot give Trump what he wants. I don't think he's in a position to raise interest rates. And yet inflation, consumer inflation, might get out of control, and he'll be blamed for it. He's in a no-win situation here. No-win situation. So I feel for central planner, comrade, Fed Chairman Powell. It's a sad position to be in, but I guess he chose it. And Trump nominated it, appointed him. But it's also worth pointing out here that PPI is way up. This is a big deal, the amount it went up today. It's not trivial at all. Tariffs have an impact on prices that goes beyond just a tax increase. For example, if you're a domestic producer, you don't pay a tariff. But you see your competitors from overseas are paying a tariff, i.e. their products are now going to cost more by 15% in some cases, by 25% in other cases. Maybe if it's if it's chocolate from Switzerland, 39%. You can afford to raise your prices a little bit. You can afford to raise your prices, even though no tariff, but you can now raise prices, increase your profit margins, because customers won't rush to the competitor because the competitor's price is even higher because of tariffs. So even though PPI doesn't capture tariffs directly, it could be capturing the effect of tariffs. That is, the domestic industry's response to tariffs, which is to raise prices. So how to tell exactly what's going on here? A lot of the increase was in services. And again, how to tell what's driving this? It could be that this is just monetary inflation. It could be that what's going on is that there is just too much money. The Fed is being loose with money in spite of interest rates being where they are. Maybe they should be tighter on the money supply, right? Tightness on money and interest rates are not necessarily exactly the same thing. So how do you deal with all this? If you're the Fed, how to tell Trump now is in a corner. He's going to keep pushing the Fed to lower interest rates. But now we might be facing a Trumpflation. And really a Trump, not Trump inflation, but a Trump stagflation. Because it also looks like the economy is stagnating, right? Job numbers were adjusted downwards. So we could very well face a situation where the economy is stagnating, jobs are very hard to find, unemployment might increase, and you have inflation, which we haven't seen anything like that since kind of the mid to late 1970s. Also worth noting that Trump hasn't fired anybody yet. You would think that whoever the people are who produce the PPI, who do the PPI, this is in the Labor Statistic Bureau again, might be worried about their jobs. Maybe Trump won't fire them. Maybe this new guy he just appointed ahead is going to change the whole team. It's just unacceptable that Trump is not getting the numbers he wants. I mean, Trump wants certain numbers. He wants certain facts to be true in the world, and the world is not cooperating. The people who work for Trump in the government are not cooperating. The statisticians are not cooperating. I mean, it's a conspiracy. It really is a conspiracy to undermine Trump's presidency by denying him the numbers he so desires. And I think they should all resign in shame because they can't provide the right numbers. Anyway, that was the Producer Price Index, wholesale price of goods. We will watch next week, I think it is, for the PCE, the personal consumption, and that I think will tell us where prices are heading and whether there's direct, indirect, what kind of impact tariffs are having. I think while tariffs, again, are excluded from PPI, the indirect effects of tariffs could be significant and could be, I'm pretty sure they are, what is driving this very high number for PPI. Not good economically, not good for any of us, not good for Trump, not good news for the Trump administration, although I don't think they care. And MAGA doesn't care. MAGA doesn't care. They only care about inflation when Biden does it. They don't care about prices going up if Trump does it. It's not the same. It's not the same, right? It's not the prices going up that matters. It's why you're doing it. Trump is doing it to make America great again, and therefore it's forgivable, it's understandable, and it's acceptable. And Biden did it because he's a leftist commie, and we hate leftist commies, and therefore it's unacceptable, and we should reject it. All right, there was an editorial today, an editorial, again, by the editorial board, which is publishing regular concerns about different aspects of the Trump administration in its editorial pages. And this one is on the FDA. And an FDA, an entity that already dramatically reduces the number of life-saving drugs that are available to us. An FDA that makes it very, very difficult to bring out new drugs, new medicines, potential treatments for life extension. Very difficult to get your hand to get it because because of the FDA. It costs so much money to bring a drug to market, to do the kind of testing that they require, to dot all the I's and cross all the T's and all the stuff that the FDA requires to do, which adds billions and billions and billions of dollars to the cost of bringing a drug to market. And in particular, bringing a drug to market for diseases that are not massive, where you're not going to make a huge fortune on. A big reason why drug prices are so expensive is FDA regulations. I would like to see the FDA gone. I would like to see a market solution for testing and approving or at least recommending drugs. I'd like to see doctors take a much more active role in deciding which drugs to advise patients to take based on information that they get from various advisory organizations, and maybe they pay a monthly fee in order to get their advice. I would like to see testing labs, private testing labs, testing these drugs. I'd also like it to be possible for me to take a drug with the knowledge that it hasn't been fully 100% been tested, double-blind, whatever studies. But I'm dying of cancer anyway, so why couldn't I be able to take a drug, any case, even if it hasn't gone through all the FDA rigmarole? So I'd like the FDA not to exist and to leave it up to me to decide which drugs to take and which drugs not to take, me and my doctor. And we saw what is possible when the FDA loosens things up a little bit and speeds things up a little bit and makes an effort. We saw that with the mRNA vaccine. During COVID, we got in spite of the fact that it typically takes a vaccine 3 to 5 years to be developed and approved and tested and everything else. Here we got design, production, and testing in 8 months. And indeed, it had already passed phase 1, i.e. Harm. The risks associated with it were known and known to be minimal already in what was it, in June of 2020. I mean, the number of lives that could have been saved if in June of 2020 the drug companies could have said, look, we haven't tested efficacy yet, but we know it's not harmful. Particularly if you're in a risk group, if you want to take it, we'll give it to you. You have to sign a waiver because we're telling you, we haven't done all the testing yet. But if you only sign the waiver, come on over and get the vaccine. Why not let people who risk takers try out drugs before everybody else? Anyway, the story we heard from those who support the Trump administration is that Trump would be the deregulation president, that we would have less regulations, not more. Now, I, innocently enough, thought that this would apply to such institutions like the FDA as well as everything else, that drug approval would increase. And I think actually during Trump's first term, drug approval did go up. The people he nominated at the Health and Human Services and the FDA were people who reduced the amount of regulation and red tape and actually improved more drugs than under Biden, later on. So, for example, annual novel, this is new, for new diseases, drug approvals, averaged 52 in the first Trump presidency. And then they averaged 48 under Joe Biden. You'd expect a drop because Joe Biden is going to appoint people who are going to be more conservative, more risk-averse. That's what the left tends to be, relative to people who generally are more trusting of the pharma, but also more trusting of markets, doctors, patients, making decisions for themselves. Well, that has reversed under this Trump administration. Under this Trump administration, it is very, very, very difficult to get drugs approved. Indeed, in the first 7 months of this year, only 22 novel drugs have been approved. On current trends, that would make 38 for the year, which is 10 less than Biden and 14 less than the average in Trump's first term. And this is not an accident. I mean, let's take one example, which is a very, very concerning example. As all of us get older, the approval of drugs becomes more and more of an issue. Right? Cancer, for example, becomes more and more of a threat. And to me, this example is just horrific. Right? Here's the example. I'm reading from the editorial in the Wall Street Journal. One concern is the regulators are nixing drugs under the false flag of raising scientific standards. They should be lowering scientific standards to zero and let the market determine the scientific standards appropriate for approving drugs. But that's me being radically capitalist, which is unheard of today. A case in point is Replimune, that's the name of the company, melanoma treatment, which the FDA rejected last month. And now listen to this. This is stunning. This was a drug that was rejected, in spite of the fact about a third of the patients who hadn't responded to prior immunotherapy showed a strong response to Replimune in clinical trials. So a third of the people who other treatment did not help at all responded very positively to this. Tumors shrank in nearly all patients, and responses proved durable over 3 years. Serious side effects were rare. Oncologists who treated patients in the trial hailed the results. This was going to be a new drug, a new way, immunotherapy. To treat immunotherapy is when you get the body to fight the disease itself, which is so much better than chemotherapy. A huge advance over chemotherapy. And the oncologists, the doctors, thought this was definitely going to be approved. A third of the patients showed a strong response. Tumors shrunk in all patients, and very few side effects. And yet the FDA said the trial was, quote, not considered to be an adequate and well-controlled clinical investigation that provides substantial evidence of effectiveness. In other words, you need double, blind, placebo, lengthy, multi-year, extended trials where you're giving some people who have cancer a placebo. I think that should be immoral and unethical. Why not approve this drug? Why not give a third of the patients who have this disease a chance of getting cured? I continue from the article. Its quibble is that the trial lacked a control group. Vinay Prasad, the head of the biologics division, the guy who resigned and then was rehired, has long criticized such single-arm studies that have no placebo group. But it would be, again, unethical to give people with a disease that's going to kill them a placebo. Reading again, he believes medicines should undergo randomized controlled trials that track patients over longer periods to measure overall survival. Never mind if patients die in the interim. I mean, this is just horrific. Replimune's executives said they were blindsided by the FDA rejection and its shifting post hoc demands. That is, its changing standards. Leading oncologists lambasted the FDA and urged the agency to reconsider. Replimune's results are unprecedented. Vishal Patel, a dermatology oncologist at George Washington University Cancer Center, wrote to Dr. Macquarie, who's the head of the FDA, this month. Quote, physicians urgently want and need this agent based on the data they have seen. Indeed, the precedent set by this rejection is likely to halt many aspects of the science and clinical development required to move agents like this into practice in later line diseases. The world looks for leadership from the FDA based on rationality, oh my God, science and evidence. Doing a randomized controlled trial would be considered as unethical. I mean, this is just horrific. Now, this is what happens when you have one government agency determined for all of us what we can and cannot do, right? So if you have melanoma, and if you say, oh, I heard about this drug, I want to take that drug, that a third of the people saw remission, over 3 years, and no serious side effects. No, sir. The FDA, people who know better than you, people who know what's good for you, have decided you shall not have access to this drug. Instead, you're going to have to go through painful chemotherapy or whatever the alternative therapy is, and you might die because you won't have access to this. We don't accept that you have the ability to choose. I mean, the only hope we have is that other countries adopt this drug and that you can do, medical tourism and go over there to get it. And that you find a doctor who knows about this and can advise you on where you can fly to get the right drug. Because in America, in the land of the free, I guess the home of the brave, we're too cowardly to approve drugs that maybe only a third of the people can benefit from. The article goes on to say this is creating tremendous uncertainty for pharmaceutical developers. If Dr. Mackey really wants to make drug approvals for deadly and rare diseases faster and more flexible, he'd send a signal by ordering the FDA to reconsider Rippleman's treatment. Here's another one. He'd also greenlight stealth biotherapeutics treatment for Barth syndrome, which the bureaucracy is strangling. Barth causes a fatal weakening of the heart, muscle, and immune system, and afflicts about 150 Americans. So this is a very tiny disease. Very, very, very rare. Only about 150 people. It's a sort of rare disease, the therapy that Dr. Macquarie says he wants to bring to market faster. Well, Stealth applied for approval in January 2024. And the FDA Advisory Committee last autumn found the drug to be effective. It works. But the agency keeps changing its demands and has deployed one excuse after another to delay approval. The agency recently told Stealth to resubmit its application, which would take at least 6 months to review. And just reapplying an application, it's just the paperwork. I mean, I know somebody who's gone through this process. The paperwork of putting together an FDA application is unbelievable. Stealth CEO Renee McCarthy says her company might not survive that long. If the company fails, patients that began receiving the medicine in the trial will lose access, and others might never benefit. Parents of children in Stealth's trial are urging the FDA to approve it. So are Democrats and Republicans in Congress. It's just unbelievable. They don't, these bureaucrats don't care. They've got their little power struggles that they're engaged in. They've got their little agenda items with pharmaceutical companies. They want to show who's boss. And they have their theories. And one of the problems is, maybe the key problem is, that the government is the one who pays for many of these therapies. And I think some of the concern is, if we approve some of these drugs, and they're only effective to about a third of the people who get them, but they cost a lot of money, and a lot of people take them, we're spending a lot of money to save just a third. And we have to be stingy with all this money, and we have to be careful where we spend it. So it's easier just not to approve drugs, particularly if they're going to be expensive. And I'm sure this drug that is for Barth syndrome, since there are only 150 sick people in all of the United States of America, is going to be expensive. I mean, how are they going to pay back for developing this drug? Well, the solution to that is get the government out of paying for drugs. Get the government out of this business and get the government out of approving drugs. I mean, if this was a market process, if these were competing firms, then surely this would be a lot faster, a lot more effective. And the drugs would come out, and some of them would come out with lots of warning labels, right? Here's how it did in the trials. Here's what we expect. Here's the side effects. Here's our lack of, here's the rating we put on it. I mean, who knows how in a competitive market an FDA-like entities would compete with one another. And then you'd actually engage doctors at the level of their judgment. You would actually be placing more responsibility on doctors. And I think some doctors would resent it. Those are the doctors you don't want to have treat you. And other doctors would jump on the opportunity. Those are the kind of doctors you want, the doctors who love the challenge. I mean, it's so frustrating that we have all these problems that free markets are clearly the solution to. And the solution is, we know what it is. And instead we get a bunch of bureaucrats, all with degrees and you know, all these guys, the head of the FDA, Macquarie and Passat and all these guys, they're very highly qualified, very highly qualified. But they have no incentives to do the right thing. Ultimately, when they get into that position, they're just bureaucrats. Now remember, these are also people who've been appointed by Trump and by Make America Healthy Again and by RFK. So there's a good chance that half of them, or maybe 90% of them, are just quacks. They just don't know what they're doing, and they don't really care. And they're just screwing this up because they're absolutely incompetent, because that's what I expect from RFK and Trump nominees. All right. So here's a feel-good story, I think, right? So you remember that Germany, I told you the other day that Germany had put an arms embargo on Israel? They're not selling Israel arms or systems that go into weapon systems. Well, the boss of a Bavarian-based group which makes gearboxes used in Israeli armored vehicles, maybe even in Israeli tanks, I don't know, said that his company had a responsibility to ensure that Israel can maintain its deterrence capabilities. Chief Executive Alexander Segal, this is from the Financial Times, said Rennick, is the company, was trying to understand the consequences of Chancellor Merz's, this is the head of the German government, announcement last week that he would suspend the sale of military products that could be used in Gaza. Segal said that as a German company, Rennick would comply with the country's law and regulations. But he added that the company, which has a market capitalization of $6.3 billion, was considering other ways to fulfill its contracts if the ban was confirmed by Germany's Security Council. Now, quoting Segal, the CEO, "It is also clear that we are discussing a plan B. The plan B is that we relocate production of these specific transmissions to the United States." Now, Israel accounts for only 2 to 3% of Rennick's sales. So this is not about losing the business. It's not about keeping sales up. This is clearly about a principled stand that Israel should be able to buy these weapons. That Israel, should be in a position to defend itself. And that he feels like he believes that his company should be able to sell them the weapons necessary for their self-defense. I continue for the article. Asked about the morality of supplying tank components to Israel, which has been accused of widespread human rights abuses. This is the Financial Times, after all. Where am I? After Hamas's October 7, 2023, Segal said that it was a difficult discussion. He added, "Of course, we see all the discussions about the Gaza Strip, but from the German point of view, we have a responsibility to ensure that Israel is able to maintain its deterrence capabilities. These are not only needed in Gaza, but also at other borders." So he is willing to ship production to the U.S. so that he doesn't fall under the arms embargo that his local German government is imposing in Israel, so that he can continue to supply Israel with these tank parts. So good for him. It's great to see CEOs standing up to their own government and actually telling them they're wrong and telling them that they're going to, in spite of what they're told, they're going to find ways to do the opposite. Good for him. All right. Talk about Israel. There's a film that was submitted to the Toronto Film Festival, a very prestigious film festival in Toronto. It's the Toronto International Film Festival, TIFF. And the film is called The Road Between Us, The Ultimate Rescue, which is a depiction of what happened on October 7th, and an attempt of, I guess, a grandfather to rescue his children and grandchildren from what was going on there. So it depicts in the movie, it's a documentary, it depicts, it has depictions of what was going on October 7th. And for that purpose, it's using original source material. It is using film, videos that were posted by Hamas as they were raping, murdering, pillaging, slaughtering, massacring the various people. So the story is a story of one man during all of this, but they're storytellers, and they're showing what was going on. What is the context? They're showing the actual real videos, which are upsetting, I guess. Anyway, the festival, yesterday, I guess, told the filmmakers, after the film had been accepted, that they would not be able to show the film after all. And the reason they gave is, it's hard to even say it, but the reason they gave was that they had not received permission from Hamas to use videos that Hamas had posted, that Hamas had taken. It was I guess, a property right, an intellectual property right issue. They hadn't got all the clearances from the people who took the videos, most of whom I hope are dead, to actually show them in this movie. Now, can you imagine? We're not going to show you the video of the concentration camp because Hitler died before he could sign the release form, so that we could show you what he did, what his orders, did. It's, TIFF says it required permission from Hamas to use the footage. But of course, that's ridiculous. There's no way that is the case. The reality is that the film festival was facing a boycott by its own staff, who said that if the film was going to be broadcast, they would not show up for work. It was faced with the security issues around the protests against Israel. It was faced with the fact that there are lots and lots and lots of people out there in the world who do not want to see reality, who do not want to face facts, who are not interested in the evil Hamas committed, only interested in made-up evils that Israel is committing. They don't want to see, they don't want to look, they don't want to go there. And the Toronto International Film Festival was going to let that ride. Now, once this hit the news, and the New York Post made it a headline story, and it is interesting that the New York Times didn't pick it up, the Washington Post didn't pick it up, not that I saw anyway. I didn't see any of the mainstream big newspapers pick this up. This was primarily pushed by the New York Post and then picked up by a bunch of other second tier, third tier, fourth tier journals. The CEO of TIFF put out a statement saying, no, we really want to show this movie. We understand the concerns they get. They got a lot of letters from the Toronto Jewish community. This is not about censorship. Of course, it's not censorship because it's not government. This is not about restricting speech. This is not about restricting this point of view. This is just a legal issue. We're working it out. We're trying to figure it out. We're looking at different options. Yeah, right. Anyway, the good news is that by this afternoon, the Toronto International Film Festival has reversed course, and they are now committed to screening this movie. Now, if you're in Toronto, I don't know if I have any listeners in Toronto. If you're in Toronto, let me just make an ask. I don't usually ask you to do stuff. I ask for money. But I don't usually ask you to do stuff. I'm going to ask you to go see this film. I want you to go see this film. I want there to be a market response. I want people to show up. I want there to be lines. I want there to be standing room only. I want the festival to get a sense that this is a film that needs an audience, and I think it does. I mean, I can just tell you some of the photos that I've seen of scenes coming out of these are the scenes that we saw after October 7th, but I think a lot of people have forgotten. The Hamas terrorist holding up a baby, we all know what he's about to do to it. The bloodied bodies, the throwing a grenade into a bunker, where a bunch of unarmed civilians are in. Just the horror of that day. People should be reminded of that. People should bear witness to it. And by the way, this is a story of a hero. So I think you'll be inspired by it. It's a story of somebody who didn't just sit in his hands, who suddenly went out there and did something. But the fact the Toronto Film Festival could deny this film, at least initially, is just one more sign of kind of the growing anti-Israel, anti-Semitic. And it used to be that you could say, oh no, people can be anti-Israel and not be anti-Semitic. I think that's not true anymore. I think anti-Israel at this point, given what's happened, given everything that's going on, the anti-Israel is all anti-Semitism. And it is really disgusting and horrific. The lies, the made-up stories, which really, is familiar if you've followed the Israeli-Palestinian debate, because that has been the reality from the beginning. But they always make up stories. They always lie. They always invent stuff. That is the one thing that the Palestinians and their supporters have always been good at, is making up stories and lying. And it continues, and the difference is now, and I really think we've reached a tipping point in some sense. The West is just embracing their lies and rolling with it and making up their own and supporting them and amplifying them. And the West is becoming dramatically more anti-Semitic and anti-Israeli day by day now. It really is. We're watching how this unfolds, and it is super scary. Just run the numbers. Run the numbers. Israel's a small country, and its enemies and its haters more motivated, it seems, than ever, all over the world, and outnumber it. Not 10 to 1, maybe 100 to 1, maybe 200 to 1. All right, let's shift to another topic. All right, interesting article in The Economist today, which really got me thinking, reminded me of a theme that I've been playing around with for quite a while now. This is an article, the title is Growth-Loving Authoritarians Are Failing on Their Own Terms. In Asia, Eastern Africa, and Gulf, leaders now face an unpleasant choice. And here's the thing. For a long time, authoritarian leaders embraced ideologies that clearly were anti-growth, that resulted in no economic prospects, no economic success. And there's a sense in which they knew this, or at least discovered it very quickly. Whether that is true all the countries that embraced various forms of Marxism, or whether it's true of African countries that embraced socialism after colonialism, thinking that that was going to cure all their problems. They basically embraced economic models that were clearly destructive to economic growth. And, you know, a certain number of countries, starting, I'd say, in the late 1970s and into the 1980s, poor countries in Asia primarily, started embracing the ideas of Margaret Thatcher and to some extent Ronald Reagan and certainly kind of Milton Friedman and at least a little bit, right? They started embracing markets. They started embracing bits and parts of capitalism. They started embracing a market economy to some extent or another. And the consequence of this was the dramatic, unbelievable growth that we saw in the Asian tigers, in Taiwan and in South Korea and in Singapore and in I'm missing at least one Asian tiger. Anyway, these economies did phenomenally well, and even economies that didn't completely embrace the model started doing better. And then, of course, there was China, who I would argue embraced exactly that model, embraced it under authoritarianism, but embraced it to a large extent in certain provinces in China, particularly in Guangzhou and in the Shanghai area. And their economies did phenomenally well. And while some of these economies, Taiwan and South Korea in particular, transitioned at some point from authoritarian regimes to politically free regimes, others did not. Singapore did not. China did not. But basically, in those days, everybody was looking to the West, and in particular, they were looking to America as the model for development, as the model for achievement. And the authoritarians were hesitant about it because they understood that they were risking losing their authoritarian hold by mimicking America. And indeed, again, in South Korea and in Taiwan, they lost it. Those countries became politically free. Now, fast forward 20 years to the 2000s. And now you've got a whole new group of countries that are looking to grow economically and have authoritarian regimes. What model did they look for? Who did they look for an example, a model? And this is true to this date. I mean, we're talking about countries in a variety of different places in Africa, Rwanda, but Tanzania, Botswana, a bunch of countries in both East and West Africa. You're talking about the Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states, Bahrain, UAE. And you're talking about the laggards in Asia, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Thailand, Cambodia, and others. And so what do they look for? And Vietnam, of course. Well, they could look to the United States, but when they look to the United States, what do they see? They see a dying superpower. They see a fading superpower. They see a country that has no confidence, no belief, and certainly a country that does not stand by free markets. So what they see is what they think, what they believe is the death of capitalism and the failure of capitalism. And by the way, that's the real damage of 2008, 2009 financial crisis, that the whole world interpreted it as capitalism failed. This is what happens when you embrace capitalism. So don't embrace capitalism if you don't want to fail like the West failed during the financial crisis. And where do they look for success? They skip over South Korea and Taiwan. They're not interested. because most of these countries are ruled by authoritarians. And they look at South Korea and Taiwan and they see that in their transition towards prosperity, towards economic growth, towards economic success, they also transition politically. What they look for is China and Singapore. Now in China, they misinterpret the data. They believe that China grew so fast because of smart, effective central planning, state enterprises, government projects. And they look at Singapore, and again, they misinterpret the data. They think that it grew because of smart, authoritarian governance. Even though both China and Singapore, while authoritarian politically, at least before Xi, China and Singapore to this day, are very free economically. Singapore is the freest economy in the world today. China, not so much, but its economic progress are in those areas that are free. And what they learned was we can try to target economic growth through investment, through infrastructure, through government central planning, through pseudo property rights and pretend privatization and pretend markets. And that's what you see in the Gulf, what you see in Saudi Arabia. You see this massive push, all these all rich countries using their vast resources of oil to invest heavily in projects and building stuff and creating stuff. But what is underneath? What is actually being created? What is actually being built? Does it produce anything economically? If the oil ever runs out, what is actually left? It seems like nothing. And, you know, even Vietnam and other countries, to the extent that they centrally plan, they're struggling. Rwanda, which looked like it was going to be a model for economic growth in Africa, it has a dictator, which governs how capital is allocated. So does Ethiopia. The economies are growing fast, but there's no there. Ultimately, they're not producing. They're not creating, and economic growth is suffering. The model is not working because they don't understand the model. They're not willing to give up the freedom to let markets actually make determinations about capital allocations, about what should be built, where should investment be made, what should this economy specialize in. They want to decide. They're smart. MBS in Saudi Arabia, super smart. He's the guy. He wants to decide how cities should be built and how industry should be built and what Saudi Arabia should invest in and what industries should prosper and which should not. And indeed, all of this is a consequence of the fact that there's no model for capitalism anymore. There's no model even for a little bit of capitalism, which was what America was in maybe the Reagan era and the pre-Reagan era in the past. Far from capitalism, but at least in that direction, at least talking the talk. We don't talk the talk anymore. We're the most anti-capitalist there is out there right now, this Trump administration. So what you get is authoritarians who say they want growth, who are investing in a way that they think will produce growth. And as the title from The Economist suggests, they're failing on their own terms. They're failing on the terms of growth. And while they're growing now, they're not growing as fast as they expected. They all have 2030 visions that are not going to become a reality. They're growing, again, less than expected, and they're expected in the future to grow even less. Of course, China leads the pack in the end of the day. The Chinese model that they're trying to emulate is imploding, is facing massive difficulties. The economy is not crumbling. The economy is not in a depression, but it's not growing nowhere near as fast as one would expect, and it's still poor. So these economies are not growing faster than average, not faster than other poor countries. And it's sad, because I think what they're lacking, what they're really lacking is a model. The idea of freedom and capitalism. And they don't understand that whatever economic growth is produced is a consequence of whatever freedom they allow. And the less freedom they allow, the more they decide all the major economic decisions, the less economic growth they'll get, the less prosperity, the less rich their people will be. The reality is that autocrats have done generally very badly when it comes to economic growth. From 1950 to 2006, according to a paper by Mike Munger at Duke University, those who managed a decade or more in power, autocrats, produced growth of 1% a year, which is a measly amount. That is, long-term presidencies, governances, don't produce good economic results because they suggest authoritarianism. Authoritarianism is bad for freedom, and lack of freedom is bad for economic growth. What is good for economic growth? Real freedom, individual freedom, liberty. Leave people alone. And, you know, if you care about the economy, allow capital to be allocated by your financial industry. Allow it to be allocated freely. Get the government out of the business of allocating capital. That's the biggest improvement you can make. All right. Who is this good president? Bill Clinton? Bill Clinton was terrible. I mean, he didn't do much. That's the only good thing about him. And he passed one good thing, which was the welfare reform. But nothing else was good. Nothing. Jimmy Carter was good, shockingly. All right, here's a good story, but out of China. It's not a good story in terms of what it reflects about America. So you remember the Hyperloop? You remember Hyperloop? Elon Musk's idea of a super fast, I mean, several hundred miles an hour train that would go, a tunnel basically, that would go from LA to San Francisco. And it could go very fast because it would be in a tube. There was a vacuum. And the vacuum would allow it to go at unbelievable speeds, because what slows down a train? To a large extent, what slows down a train is air resistance. Well, if you take away air resistance, it can go a lot faster. Anyway, Hyperloop was a way to get rid of air resistance and allow these things to go super fast. And unfortunately, that company was shut down in 2023, and there was going to be no Hyperloop in the United States. But the Chinese have picked up on the idea. China's testing a vacuum, high-speed train that can travel, listen to this, it can travel 1,000 kilometers an hour. 1,000 kilometers an hour. Now that's significantly faster than airplanes today. Not faster than the boom airplane, but faster than conventional airplanes today. 1,000 kilometers an hour. That is pretty amazing. It's a magnetic levitation system, right? With a vacuum tube. Could make the trip between Shanghai and Guangzhou 200 kilometers. That trip would take 9 minutes. It would be a massive energy saver, again, because no friction, less time, you use the same amount of energy to produce much higher speeds. And you could make the Beijing Shanghai trip in an hour and a half. I think it takes 5 hours, 6 hours now. I did that train in the high-speed train that they have. I don't know. Ian says acceleration might be a problem. Maybe. My guess is there are ways to solve that. And this is the thing. This is the kind of stuff China's doing. Big, ambitious infrastructure projects that 100 and something years ago, America was the bold one in the world to do. And now it's China. Now, I'll take it because I think it's cool. And once it's provable, maybe others will use it, the technology. But it really is amazing. And it just shows human ingenuity is not stopping. Maybe you can't get anything done in the US, but maybe in other places, some stuff can be done. And again, the richer, the more successful this kind of stuff happens in China, I think ultimately in the long run, the less powerful the central government will be. All right. Somebody says in the chat here, somebody says in the Twitter feed, somebody says, if California Governor Newsom tried to build this, it would take at least 124 years. It would cost $9 trillion and span just 9 miles and crawl ultimately, when it all's said and done, at 9 miles an hour instead of 1,000 kilometers an hour. Anyway, this is cool. And I'm sure a lot of people will poo-poo it because it's China. But it is what it is. All right. Here's some more cool stuff. Cool, but, weird and probably a little deceptive. There's a new fad in Silicon Valley. There are companies now that are doing what's called genetic optimization on IVF embryos. So basically, what you can do is, instead of conceiving the usual way, you can use IVF technology, and then you can have multiple embryos, and then you can choose which one to carry to term, to actually embed in the mother and carry to term. And there are companies, at least 2 companies that I read about, that offer this genetic optimization. So they scan the genes of these embryos. They scan them for diseases, for the things that parents would want their kids to avoid, any predilection to cancer or things like that. But it's also possible, or at least these companies are claiming that they have some insight into being able to predict the IQ, the intelligence, at least as measured by IQ, of the different embryos, if once they become obviously born and become human beings. So a startup called Nucleus Genomics and Heresight, they become publicly offering IQ predictions based on genetic tests to help people select which embryos to use in vitro fertilization. And there's a huge demand for this. It can cost anywhere from $6,000 to $50,000 to get this genetic screening, including IQ, done. And of course, there are going to be trade-offs because you're not designing the baby, right? Not yet. So, all right, I want the baby not to have cancer, but the not to have cancer might also involve low IQ. So how do I balance it all? How do I, where do I place IQ relative to cancer, relative to, I don't know, eye color, blonde hair. I don't know what else they're offering. What is important, what is not important? How do I rank these things? Alzheimer's, for example, we know genes that make it very high probability you get Alzheimer's. On the other hand, by the time these kids grow up, there might be a cure for Alzheimer's. Same with cancer. IQ is forever. Although, with those chips planted inside your brain, you could increase your IQ quite a bit. So now in Silicon Valley right now, there's a big push for IQ testing for embryos because, I think I've talked about this in the past. I think a lot of people in the Valley, particularly the ones who get very rich, very quickly, very young, they have this philosopher king mentality. They know it all. They are the rulers. They succeed because they're smart, because they were born with high IQ. They're convinced of that. They bought into the Warren Buffett, Bill Gates story that it has nothing to do with any choices they made. It all has to do with the IQ. It's all determinism. There's no free will after all, they tell us. And as a consequence, they are, there are matchmaking services now in Silicon Valley that are matching you up with somebody who, there's a high likelihood the two of you will produce a brilliant baby. Supposedly intelligence and IQ are being discussed all the time. Matchmaking has made a comeback. People are sick of the online dating, so they're using live matchmakers, like in the old Jewish shtetl. And IQ is a big criteria. I only want to date women with an IQ of 130 and above. I guess some of the guys on my chat probably want to date women with very low IQ, if I remember right? Some of the incels and some of the men going their own way, they want low IQ women. They don't want high IQ women. They certainly don't want high earning women. So the idea is, a lot of these kids, and many of them are young, in Silicon Valley who are really, really smart and being very successful, they also think they have a kind of a moral responsibility to society to produce genius babies. This is how the world will become better, and this is how we need geniuses. We need really smart people, right? Among the rationalists, since AI poses an existential threat, we need geniuses to be able to combat AI. And the only way to get geniuses is to produce them. And the only way to produce them is by screening our embryos or by marrying and having kids only with somebody as, the smartest person we can find. So while it's great that we have now the potential to screen genes for all kinds of things, and I have no moral qualms with people doing designer babies, and it's great that we can screen for these things, this obsession with the determinism of genes is troubling, particularly among the smartest, most successful in our world. It's also a bit of a scam, because the reality is that we don't exactly know what produces high IQ. The probability that these probabilistic models actually work is very low. Maybe they're giving you an extra few points in the IQ score. They're not making a huge difference. But people want to believe. Now, they'll get better. One day this will exist. But it's a little early. And, I think this obsession with raw IQ instead of thinking about the kind of world that encourages innovation, encourages progress, raising kids to be independent thinkers, independent producers, doing the kind of work that ultimately is going to be required in order to live in a successful world, producing babies is not going to be the solution. And you know, this obsession about IQ with dating is not going to lead to good results, I don't think. But it's going to be interesting. According to research, let's see, current models explain about 5 to 10% of the differences in cognitive ability between people. If parents rank their embryos by predictive IQ, they could gain between 3 to 4 points on average compared to choosing randomly. It's not going to be something to make your child a prodigy, these models. I love the tech. I love the tech. I love that we're looking at that. I love that we want to improve the human race. I think that's all a good thing, not a bad thing. All right, guys, that is the news for Thursday, August 14th. Where else are you going to hear about these stories? I don't think most of the podcasters out there talking about them. Maybe that's why they have 5 million subscribers, because they only talk about the latest grievance, the latest injustice that the left has committed against us. That is what sells. All right, quick reminder that we have goals, that we try to meet those goals, that the goal in this show is $250 an hour in the super chat or the stickers. If you want help in reaching that, maybe go to Twitter and remind everybody the show is on live right now and they can come over and support the show. But another way is just to do a sticker or to ask a question. The question will also, get you to tell me what you want me to talk about. If there are stories I'm missing, if there's something going on that you want me to talk about. I did talk about Sweeney. I talked about Sydney Sweeney. I don't know that I had to take anybody cared about, or anybody valued, but I did talk about Sweeney, and not enough. I should have Sweeney Corner every show. That'll get the numbers up. So please come over and support the show, value for value. We have 3 sponsors for the show: Hendershot Wealth, hendershotwealth.com/YBS, hendershotwealth.com/YBS. Hendershot Health has products that can help you save significant money on your taxes. In order to learn more about this, particularly capital gains taxes, and in particular if you're in a situation where you have significant capital gains liabilities, tax liabilities, then check out hendershotwealth.com/YBS, or check out the video I did with Robert Hendershot that is on my YouTube channel in the playlist that is for sponsors. So check that out. Alex Epstein. Alex Epstein is the #1 thinker on all things related to fossil fuels. If you want to understand why this industry is so crucial for human existence, if you want to understand why we cannot just transition to solar and wind and live happily ever after, if you want to know why Alex thinks that the way to solve whatever environmental problems we face today is more fossil fuels, then read Alex. He's provocative, he's controversial, but he's damn good, and he's got facts and reality in his side. So try him out, alexepstein.substack.com. And finally, the Ayn Rand Institute is reminding you that there is an app for your phone. Ayn Rand Institute app. You can find it at aynrand.org/start here, where you can link to either the Apple Store or the Google Store and get your app. The app has all of Leonard Peikoff's courses, crucial to the studying and understanding of objectivism. And it has lots of content by Ayn Rand herself. So check it out. It's great to have kind of Ayn Rand everything in your pocket, available to you anytime through your phone. All right, and finally, a reminder to check out patreon.com and become a monthly contributor to the show. Please do that. And it's great because it's a way for this show to have reliable income, and this show is only possible because of you, because of the support I get from you. All right, let's do sticker thank yous quickly. Wes, $50. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Wes comes through pretty much every show, every day. Really, really appreciate it. Helps us get to our targets. Let's see, who else did a sticker? We got Jason. Thank you, Jason. Esoteric Economy, thank you. Normative Randroid, thank you. James, thank you. And Jonathan Honing, thank you guys. Really appreciate that. Really appreciate it. I will add, so we're still kind of quite a bit short of our second hour goal. We're all into the second hour, and we got quite a few questions, so we'll be here for a little while. Of course, we'll be here for even longer if you ask questions. I mean, Jonathan Honing always likes 3-hour shows. I'm willing to go for 3 hours if we get enough questions, and the questions, a significant number of them needs to be at the $20 level or higher, so that we can make up the gap and reach our goals. Goals are meant to be achieved. So please help me achieve these goals for the show. All right, let us start with Andrew, $50 question. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Andrew says, Yaron, drugs are passé. The technological wonders of pharma are for a modern era. We seek the enlightenment of the Middle Ages. We seek to go backwards towards simple, shortened life. Life extension is an effrontery. This is from a modern conservative. I don't know if it's a direct quote, if you're quoting somebody in particular, or whether that's just you basically ridiculing them. But it's absolutely the case, right? I do think that life extension is viewed as an effrontery by many people within the conservative movement, particularly the religious conservative movement. They do view it as playing God, and there are all kinds of social and other consequences to longevity that they think are worse than death, obviously, like divorce, right? Divorce rates would go up if we lived long. They don't like that. Longevity is also very self-interested. It's very selfish. It's promoting your life extension. It's promoting, and you'd have to dedicate real time and effort and thought to how to live long. You would have to dedicate money to buying the drugs and the medicines and whatever to be able to live long. So, it's a very selfish activity, longevity. It's, yeah, we definitely cannot allow it. People to pursue this self-interested thing. Yeah, Subikeski says divorce. In the report that was submitted to George Bush in 2004 on Biotech Commission on life extension, the committee advised not investing in life extension and not promoting life extension, and for the FDA not to approve life-extending drugs. And they had a whole bunch of reasons. And one of the reasons was that it would create, bad social outcomes, because the reality is that if we live to be 200, then divorce rates would go up. I mean, it's one thing to be married for, 50, 60 years, but you can't expect people to actually stay married for 100, 150 years. They'd get bored with one another. I mean, 100 years is a long time. And divorce rates would go up, because the longer people are together, the more likely it is they get divorced. Or this wasn't the commission, but maybe people would come up with alternative living arrangements. I don't know. The point is, it would shake up the conventional, traditional, conservative way of living that is so central to, Western civilization. I don't know what bullshit they have. But that was one of the reasons. One of the things that they listed. They listed many stupid things. That one stuck with me because it was stupid on steroids. But yes, the conservative movement today, or what counts as the conservatives, MAGA, the right, whatever you want to call them, rejects the Enlightenment, basically rejects science. You can see that with RFK and all the people he's appointed. They reject science. They reject modern medicine. They hate the pharmaceutical industry. These are witch doctors, and they want us to go backwards. This is the Daily Wire people. This is religion as the ultimate value. Let's return to a time when we're more religious. This is a a backward-looking, reactionary movement, the exact opposite of what you would consider a progressive, a properly progressive, a good progressive movement. They are regressive movement. And this is the right and the left, right? This is environmentalists who want to see mankind suffer and die, and some of the Christians who want to see mankind suffer and die. It's so similar. Okay. Thank you, Andrew. I agree with you. I agree. Hakon, thank you. Yaron, how do you personally compartmentalize the tragic human toll in Gaza from Israel's strategic aims, while still prioritizing the primacy of individual rights over collective ideals? What rational framework reconciles? Well, I mean, it's very simple. The tragic human toll in Gaza is the fault and the responsibility of Hamas. And it could end tomorrow if Hamas surrendered and released the hostages. Israel literally bears no responsibility for whoever dies, whatever suffering, whatever innocents die in Gaza. All the blame, literally 100% of it, and I have no qualms about this at all, lies with Hamas and those who make Hamas possible, which is a big chunk of the population in Gaza. Now, Israel has only, in my view, should have only one strategic aim, and that is the destruction of Hamas and the, I don't know, what's the term I'm looking for? The conveying to the Palestinian people that their policies towards Israel are self-destructive, will never work. The Palestinian people need to be, they need to be humiliated. They need to be on their knees. They need to accept the fact that they are being wrong, and they need to change their ways. And that will never happen unless they go through shock therapy, which is going on right now. Now, the individual rights at stake are not the Palestinians. The Palestinians' individual rights are being violated by Hamas not surrendering. The responsibility of the Israeli government is to the individual rights of its own people, of Israeli citizens, who they are responsible for protecting. And they need to do, it's their moral responsibility to do whatever it takes to protect the individual rights of Israelis, and that requires the complete annihilation of Hamas and complete victory over the Palestinians. That's what protecting the individual rights of Israelis requires. And that does not involve violating the rights of Palestinians. The rights of Palestinians are being violated not by Israel. They're being violated by Hamas. Israel is doing what it needs to do to protect itself. If you kidnap my kids, and in order to get them free in a shootout with you, a bunch of innocent pedestrians get shot, it's your fault, not mine. Even if the bullets out of my gun hit the pedestrians. You're the one who violated rights. You're the one who initiated the violence. You bear all the moral responsibility, all of it. So I don't think there's any problem. Now, if you want the full rational framework, then I've got an essay on this. Just look it up online. It's easy to find. Just War Theory. Just put Just War Theory, Yaron Brook. And you will get the essay I wrote with Alex Epstein on exactly this issue. You know, the what it takes to win, and when is it appropriate. You know, what is the moral status of civilians even innocent civilians, in enemy territory, in a war? What is the morality of war? How should armies behave in war? We go into great depth and length in that essay, so if you really have a question, if my answer is not satisfying, then please check out the essay, and I don't know that I could do much better than that essay. If you have specific questions coming out of that essay, ask them, but what Israel is doing is an individualistic, individual rights respecting approach. Barbara. Glad you're enjoying our weather here in Portugal. Sorry I was not able to go to Lisbon for the Objectives meetup. I'm sure everyone working for Trump is terrified of upsetting him. Thanks for the news. Yes, I mean, I'm sure they are. And so they don't upset him too often, except when the statistics come out, and it's hard to manipulate the statistics on a regular basis. And you're going to get caught, and so there's a lot of, yeah, it's challenging. Thank you, Barbara. Really appreciate the support. Sorry I missed meeting you while I'm here in Portugal. Monotropic. If you knew a work colleague was cheating on their spouse, would you inform the spouse? Would failure to do so amount to morally sanctioning their behavior? No, I don't think so. I don't think it's any of your business. It's their responsibility, not yours. Now, you need to evaluate your relationship with this person, but it's not your responsibility to go and tell the spouse that they're being cheated on. Unless you're friends with the spouse. Now, but this is just a work colleague. You didn't say friends. But if it's just a work colleague, no, you have no responsibility at all. You're not sanctioning their behavior. You are not responsible for the behavior of other people. You're not responsible for letting other people know, that somebody did something to them. It's not on you. So no. Now, if they're friends, then it becomes a much bigger conundrum, and then I would say yes. Then I think you do need to tell. If you're friends with the wife, and I wouldn't be friends with the husband if it was acting irrationally or dishonestly. Now, again, beware of coming to broad conclusions about the behaviors of other people. There might be good reason for somebody to be cheating, as you call it. It might not be cheating. They might be telling their wife. Their wife might know. I mean, who knows what's going on? It's very tricky to tell what's going on in other people's bedrooms. I don't make automatic assumptions about people's relationships. They might know already, and they're letting it go. It might have been consensual. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities. Right? Yeah, anyway. John. Attributing Argentina's recent economic success to Milei is appropriate within the proper context, that it's ideas that drive the world. The leader does matter, but ideas and freedom drive results. Do you think it would be smart for Milei to make it explicit that the success they're now enjoying is due to the productivity of the Argentinian people, not the political decree or mere luck? All right, let me stop there and then I'll do the rest of the question. Yes, but we have to be careful here. So it's ideas in action. And Milei is responsible here because Milei has eliminated the force, the coercion, the restrictions, the barriers to productivity. He has done that. Now, it's true, once you eliminate those barriers, it is the Argentinian people who actually go and get to work, actually go and produce, make something, create something. That is true. So they both get credit. Milei gets credit for eliminating the barriers. It's his ideas get credit but it's an implementation of his good ideas that get credit. And then the Argentinian people get credit for actually doing something with it, but and actually going out and taking advantage, if you will, of the liberty and freedom that they have. So yes, I think the more one emphasizes that it's your productivity, and your productivity is made possible because of the freedom that these ideas implemented allow you, and I'm implementing them support me to implement them more, that is the package that needs to be sold. And I think he does that to a large extent. John continues, that his role has been to remove the political shackles that held them back, unleashing the creative and productive potential of millions of individuals acting in their own rational self-interest. Yes, of course they have to want to act in their own self-interest. But yes, saying all that would be incredibly valuable. And to some extent he does, not to the extent you or I would want, not as articulately as you put it, but to some extent he does, because he talks about the benefits of freedom and the benefits of unshackling and the benefits of markets. He could make it more explicit if he was more of an objectivist and less of a libertarian. Then he would put it in more individualistic terms, which is what you did, the potential of millions acting in their own rational self-interest to be productive. Yeah. John continues, I think this would help people better conceptualize where success comes from and hold comparison of Milei to Trump, where one works towards an ideal and the other is pure narcissistic emotionalism. Yes, I agree with you completely. It would also clarify to them that it's not a personality, it's a set of ideas, and it's liberty and freedom, but at the end of the day, it's also culture. It's their culture. It's what they do with that liberty and freedom, which will determine their fate. It will allow a greater confidence that this Argentinian experiment will continue. Yeah, you're absolutely right that the more explicit you are about the ideas that are having positive results and about how those ideas filter through to the positive results, the more sustainable they are, the more impactful they are, the ideas are. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you, John. All right, guys. We've got about 120 people watching right now live on Twitter. We probably had about 300 people, 400 people watching throughout the show. Let's get some stickers going, even $1.99, $2.99, something, so we can chip away and get closer to our goal. Remember, this is a value for value. You listen to the show, you must get some value from the show. That's why you listen, I assume. The way to express your value is to just click on that $ at the bottom of the chat thing here, and that allows you to do a quick super chat or ask a question or just make a financial contribution. Or you could click right now on Patreon and go to Patreon and become a monthly supporter, which would be great. And don't forget to like the show before you leave. Liking is free and it helps the algorithm. It helps me with the algorithm significantly. Harper Campbell, do you think 50 years from now politicians in the West will be much more principled, free marketeers than today, even if they're so far from objectivism? 50 years from now. Yeah, I think so. Either that or we'll be in the midst of a kind of a dark age. But I hope that is the answer, that they will be much more free market oriented and much more principled in their stand and on the way to objectivism. RDF, thank you for the sticker. Really appreciate that. Stephen Harper, Mary Aline, Gail, thank you guys. RDF, thank you all for the stickers. Keep them coming. Eddie, thank you for the sticker. Really appreciate it. James says, just 10 years ago, characters like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owen, Nick Fuentes would be inconceivable. That these creatures of mainstream suggest the American Weimar Republic is collapsing quickly. It really is scary. Just remember, America is a big country and they are still pretty marginal. They're not central figures. They might be among certain groups of youth, they might be among certain people on the right, but they're not central figures in the culture. Not yet. But it is tragic and sad that they're even in the culture. James, you hear it with young people today, being for freedom and individual liberty are for boomers. Being a Nazi is hip and cool. Well, I don't know how much you hear that. I hope that's not massive numbers. I do think it's more numbers than, I think it's scary. It's bigger than it should be by far. But yes, I think freedom and capitalism, I remember people leaving objectivism in 2016 to go to the alt-right because the alt-right was cool and objectivism was staid and there was no action. You didn't have cool memes. You didn't insult people. You didn't smash windows. You didn't do cool stuff. So alt-right. Yeah. And that's the kind of mindless kids that we've raised, I guess. Andrew, your remarks about RFK's anti-science attitude remind me of when Rand was asked about her similarities with Buckley, and she said none. And that when there's a difference of reason and mysticism, politics don't even matter. Yeah, I agree with her. And this is, this is why, often voting Republican is contemptible, is wrong. It's just bad decision. Because when the difference between reason and mysticism, then politics, what difference does it make? Yep. Liam, and RFK is a mystic, no question about it. A secular atheist mystic, but a mystic. Liam says, these tariffs are being used for corruption and favoritism to a scale that has never been seen in this country's history. It's probably true, although corruption and favoritism during the railroad era were really bad, and widespread. Here it's all about Trump and the people around Trump. In those days, it was at the state level, at the federal level, different commissions. It was really bad with the railroads. And it was only one industry, or mostly one industry. Not your average algorithm. Typically, does your next move matter more than your last mistake? Yes, the future is always more important than the past. The past is the past. The past is over. The past doesn't exist. And the past will never come back. And the past is finished. Your whole orientation in life should be around the future. And therefore, your next move is what matters. What happened in the past is dead. Now, it's important to the extent that you should need to learn from it and know the consequence of the past. But right now, looking forward is what matters. And the orientation of successful people is towards the future, not the past. Z400 Race asks if you can email me the question. Yes, you can. Email away. Let's see. Roland, a little compensation for the tariffs on your Swiss chocolate. Luckily, my chocolate is not Swiss, but I appreciate it anyway. I'm sure my chocolate is tariffed, not quite at that level, but tariffed from elsewhere. I think my favorite chocolate right now is from Spain. Not known for its chocolate necessarily, but I like it. Paul, what do you think of Trump's review of Smithsonian Museum's exhibitions to make sure they align with Trump's view of history? I think it's horrible. I think it's corrupt. What view of history does Trump have? What authority does Trump have over his view of history? The Smithsonian shouldn't exist. It should be privatized. The federal government should not have a position in history, should not have a view of history. I don't think, to the extent the Smithsonian exists, it should be independent of politics, independent of the president, and it'll be a outcome of academic historians. And if history is corrupted and debased, then that's what will appear. The way to fight that is get better historians, or to get the government out of the business of teaching history, or having museums of history. It shouldn't be the role of government to manage and run museums. They should be all privatized. All those museums in Washington, D.C. should be privatized. Andrew, objectivists should do something with their lives other than just be objectivists, but in their very acceptance of objectivism, one has achieved having exemplified virtues such as honesty and independence. Well, yes, but it really, what does it mean to accept objectivism if you don't live it? So the real acceptance is the living of it. To me, it's much more important how you live than what you declare yourself to be. So go out and live. And listen to my Rules for Life shows that have something to say about how to live and living. I don't see the, oh, is that the email? Paul, right? All right, let me take this, otherwise it'll disappear. Morally speaking, what's to stop Israel from breaking Gaza into 10 sections and leaving one and leveling one every 6 hours until all Gazans surrender unconditionally? No negotiation, no conversation. We will pound you until you submit immediately and completely. It seems like they would cave after the first strike. But who would cave? I don't think Hamas cares. This is the problem with Islamists. It's a suicidal ideology. So it's not easy to get them to cave. But yeah, I mean, that's not that different than the strategy I proposed on October 7th. Gaza needed to be pounded. And it needed to be made very clear who was responsible for the deaths that were happening. And the Palestinians needed to be encouraged to turn on Hamas and to release the hostages. And if not, they would continue to be pounded. Water, food, electricity, internet service should have all been cut off, stopped, immediately. I mean, it is ridiculous to feed your enemy as you fight them. And you say, not everybody's your enemy, the children are not your enemy. That's right. Gaza can get their children fed as soon as they surrender. As soon as they hand over the hostages, everybody will be fed. Andrew. Well, I mean, you should draw a difference between Hamas and the Gazans to the extent that some Gazans are innocent. And the ones I think of here are the children. Their parents are not innocent for the most part, but the children are innocent. I'll grant that 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds and 5-year-olds and even 8-year-olds are innocent. 12, 13, 14-year-olds, I don't know. But young children are innocent. And yet, again, their deaths are completely at the hands of Hamas. Andrew, Jews pride themselves in beating great odds, defeating the hordes. They attribute their success to God, but in reality, it is their fidelity to reason and explains their victories against the odds. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Jews pride themselves over beating great odds. I mean, 6 million of them died in the Holocaust. About 50% of the Jewish population in Europe died and that was almost all the population, died in the Holocaust. I don't think that's defeating the hordes or beating the odds. I guess the fact that some survived is beating the odds. I don't think most Jews attribute it to God. Most of the Jews I know are pretty secular. Many of them are atheists. What it means to be Jewish without recognizing religion is an interesting question. Again, I think you're defined more by how the world defines you than by how you define yourself. The world defines you as Jews because that's the bloodline, that's the genetic line that you come from. But to the extent that Jews have succeeded, they've succeeded for the same reason anybody succeeds. To the extent anybody really succeeds, it's because of his fidelity to reason. There's nothing unique here about Jews. Lone dissenter. You said you'd be rereading Atlas on audiobooks. Started yet? Maybe keep us updated on your reflections along the way. Curious what strikes you on a fresh reading. Maybe show on wisdom from Atlas. Yeah, I mean, I will be. I haven't started yet just because I'm so backed up in books that I have to read for material I need for different projects I'm working on. So at some point, I will reread Atlas Shrugged. I listen to it, and I will share with you my impressions when I do that. All right, guys. Thank you. Thank you to all the super chatters. Thank you for being here. Tomorrow's show will be at about the same time, maybe half an hour later. It'll be at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Hopefully, you'll be able to join me then. And isn't it still a form of collectivism? I'm not sure what you're talking about, Fleshing. you know, it can be a form of collectivism. It can also be a form of self-defense. You know, if the world views you as a member of a collective and wants to kill you because you're a member of a particular group that they define, even if you say, I'm not a member of the group, I'm an individual, I have nothing to do with them, you might have to join up with other members of this group in order to defend yourself. You might not have a choice. Are you doing it in the name of collectivism? Absolutely not. You're doing it in the name of defending yourself. But the world has categorized this and put you into a box as a collectivist. And they are the collectivists, not you. You are trying to protect yourself from them, from the people who would categorize you as something, even though you don't categorize yourself that way. Am I a Jew? No. It doesn't mean anything to me to say that I'm a Jew. I don't consider myself part of the tribe and part of the collective. But do I know that if I go into the streets of London and defend Israel, I will be considered a Jew? Or if I walk around with my Israeli passport, or in my American passport it says I was born in Jerusalem, will I be considered a Jew by all the people out there? And will they want to lynch me? Even though I denounce collectivism, reject my own Judaism, want to be just, but I defend Israel because it's a free country. Do they care? No. They will view me as a Jew and they will lynch me with the rest of the Jews and they will throw me into the concentration camp. And if my only way to protect myself, if the only way to protect myself is to get together with a bunch of other people who affiliate themselves or have been affiliated themselves with being Jewish, and that's the only way I can survive, then so be it. That's not me being a collectivist. That's them being collectivists, the people trying to kill me. That's why Israel is primarily an act of self-defense, the creation of the state of Israel. Primarily an act of self-defense, not primarily a collectivistic act. Now, it's got collectivistic elements, and I'm a huge critic of Israel for being tribal and collectivist and all of that, and appeasing religion and all of that. I'm a huge critic of Israel. But in its basic creation, it was an act of self-defense. Flesh, and thank you for the backing up the question with a sticker. And nominalists, is it okay to buy products from a communist country such as China? Well, you need to answer that. Do you think it's okay? There's no dictate. I don't think, let me just say this. China is not communist. I mean, I've said this for years now, and I'll keep saying it. For over 10 years I've said this. China is not communist. It's authoritarian. If anything, China is fascist. It's much more fascist than communist. There's no, America has a bigger welfare state than China. There's very little redistribution of wealth. The Chinese don't own all the means of production. They own some, but not all, and certainly not even the most important ones. So, no, I don't think China is communist. I think China is fascist. Is it okay to buy products from China? You have to make that call. It depends on how difficult it is to get products from other places. It depends on your evaluation of China as a threat to the United States. And it depends on your evaluation of the extent to which buying a product from China helps the Chinese government versus helping the company and the individuals from which you bought the product. So I think there's enough freedom to assume that many of the products, not all, that we buy from China, the benefit accrues to the individuals. But yes, there are some products where the benefit accrues to the state. I definitely think it's wrong to buy products from state-owned enterprises in China. And over time, as China becomes more authoritarian and more restrictive and more state-owned, more fascist, then it will become less and less morally okay to buy stuff from China. But every one of us needs to make those evaluations based on how much time you have to research, how much effort you're willing to make, and what alternatives you have. You can't cripple your life because I'm not buying stuff from China. given the current reality. Andrew, just some feedback. The show walking through Rand's essay on egalitarianism and inflation was excellent. Would you consider interacting with her work more on the show, if on only members show? Yes. I think that's a good idea for only members show to do shows on particular Ayn Rand essays. Those shows require a lot of prep, so that's the one hesitation I have. But I am thinking of doing that. Thank you, Andrew. Drin, who is today's Da Vinci, Einstein, Beethoven, Mozart, or Churchill? Besides Rand, who is a figure you're in awe of in your lifetime? Politician, writer? I mean, no politician. Maybe Milei is the closest one you could get to. In terms of writers, nobody right now that I would say I'm in awe of, outside of objectivism. Of course, you know, the objectivist writers. But a lot of the people who are Da Vinci, Einstein, Beethoven, Mozart, Churchill are business people. And there are a lot of business people I'm in awe of. I mean, just the fact that business people can function in the world in which we live and produce and create and build and grow in spite of all the regulations and controls and mindlessness of some of the employees, and is staggering. But you know, I'd certainly say that somebody like Steve Jobs is a great personal hero of mine. Elon Musk sometimes, and certainly in his productive capacity. Jeff Bezos is amazing. I mean, what he built, what he's built, the kind of company he's built. And there are lots of others. I mean, the progress that's being made right now in AI is stunning. So it's more people in business than anywhere else. That's where the real geniuses, if you will, are. The real men of ability are. All right, guys, thank you for the last minute questions. I appreciate that. I will see you guys tomorrow, 4:30 p.m. East Coast time. Talk to you then.